everyone, my name is Caitlin and I am 27 years old. This is my first YouTube video and I wanted to create this channel because I love to read and I've loved to read for as long as I can remember. To give you an example, when I was a kid, one time my mom and I went to New York City just for the weekend and I packed an entire suitcase full of books. No clothes. Didn't pack any clothes. I got up to New York in the hotel and we were going to go to a Broadway play. I think it was like Phantom of the Opera or something, and I opened my suitcase and there are all of my lovely books, but nothing to wear. So needless to say, my mom was not very happy. But that's just one example. I have been obsessed with books for as long as I can remember. Everywhere I go, I carry a book with me because you never know when you're going to get a chance to read. I also carry a backup to the book and a backup to the backup. And if I ever have to go out of town, it's always such a dilemma, like what books am I going to take, because I don't know if I'm going to have a lot of free time to read or no free time. So usually I end up really overpacking in the book department. But that's okay because, I think every book lover has that problem. So I live in Colorado. I love it here. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm sure I will show some pictures of the lovely scenery here at some point. I like to hike, so I probably will do some videos about hiking. Let's see. I own my own soap shop. I sell handmade soap on Etsy that I made myself, and I'm also starting to sell candles and bath scrubs and, all sorts of fun stuff. And while this channel is not going to be an advertising platform for my shop, I will probably mention my product from time to time because that is another thing that I get extremely excited about. So lots of times people ask, like, what books got you into reading in the first place? And honestly, I can't remember I can't name a specific book or series that got me into reading because I've loved to read for as long as I can remember. I remember being 3 years old and reading The Night Before Christmas to my family because it was something to read and it was something that I could read at that age. I remember in kindergarten and first grade reading my little I Can Read chapter books and even like the reading textbooks that we would have in class. I would just read those on my own, and I loved it. Whenever books were assigned in class, I always read ahead. I always thought that the pace that the class took was just really slow, and I used to get in trouble for giving spoilers away, which now I know better, but then I was just a know-it-all and wanted to tell everyone how the book turned out, and yeah, kind of a brat, I guess, in that regards, but whatever. Some early books that I can remember that just stand out to me. I was really into The Babysitter's Little Sister. I didn't really get into The Babysitter's Club itself, but I love the Little Sister books. That was around second grade, I would say. Around that time, I also read the Goosebumps books, even though my teacher hated that I read them. I loved those books, and honestly, when I have kids, or if I were a teacher, I would not discourage anyone from reading any types of books unless it was just like really inappropriate, like written for adults and had inappropriate content, because like you never want to take away that love of reading from a child. You want to encourage, any type. If they're reading anything, you want to say, that's great, keep reading, read whatever you want as long as you're reading. And so I am so glad that I didn't let my teacher influence me in that way because, it was just one of those things that I loved. I loved reading anything, but the Goosebumps by R.L. Stine were a big series for me. I loved them. I also, on that note, loved Animorphs, which I still have a lot of those and sometimes reread them just for my pleasure. I was also really into horses when I was a kid. I rode horses after school several days a week. So if a book had horses in it, then you can bet I was going to read it. I really loved the Pony Club books. I liked the Misty books. I don't know if any of you guys remember those, but it was about these wild ponies at some island in Virginia, and it was really good. I liked those a lot. Another series that I read a lot when I was a child were the American Girl doll books. I loved those so much. I think I started reading those when I was like 7, and the funny thing was, I didn't understand the difference between fiction and nonfiction, so I thought the American Girl dolls were actually like real, like they had been real people in the past, And so when I would get together with my friends, we would pretend that we were like the descendants of Felicity, which sadly Felicity is discontinued. And that was like my favorite one. I was so sad to hear about that. What are they doing? I loved the Felicity books were my favorite. I loved all of them though. I loved Kirsten, Samantha, Molly. Those were just, I loved the American Girl dolls. They really, really influenced me as a kid. They really got me interested in history, which I'm still interested in history, but like I can't relate to people who do that for their living. But, you know, I love historical things, and I really think the American Girl dolls, the American Girl books really helped me to get interested in history and our past, and yeah. When I was a little older, I think I was 11 years old, the Harry Potter books actually opened my eyes to the genre of young adult fantasy. I don't think I'd read a lot of fantasy before Harry Potter, and I remember my mom took me to Barnes & Noble when I was 11, and the first 2 books were out at this point, and I just happened to see them on display at the bookshelf at Barnes & Noble. It was before they were really popular, and I was like, those look kind of good, and so my mom only let me buy the first book because they were both only in hardcover. And she would only, the hardcover books are expensive, and so she only let me buy one. And even though I was like, oh my gosh, I'm probably gonna like it, and I'm gonna want the second one, she was like, nope, it's hardcover, you can only get one. So I bought the first one, and we went on vacation to my parents' mountain house in North Carolina, which this house was about an hour away. And on the drive up there, I read the entire first book. I think I had like 3 chapters left when we got to the house, and I finished them in like, less than a half hour. Like really quickly. I was just so into this book, and I had to have the second one. And this house that they had is in the absolute middle of nowhere, and there aren't any bookstores there. So I had to wait an agonizing weekend before I could get my hands on the second book. And so, we finally, when we got back to where we lived, was able to go back to Barnes & Noble again and get the second one. And then, of course, it was like another year before the third book came out. But I was so hooked. And so I loved that genre. And after that, I would read a lot of books like by Tamara Pierce, the Alana series, which I thought was so good at that point. And I still really enjoy those books. But yeah, like ever since then, I think my favorite genre really has been fantasy. I got into the Redwall books after that. Ella Enchanted, I think I read that after Harry Potter. I might be mistaken on that one. That one might have come earlier. But, a lot of those really popular books now, I just didn't really know about then and wasn't interested. I read more realistic and historical fiction. So that was a big turning point in my reading life as to like what I enjoyed reading. And so for that reason, Harry Potter is definitely one of the most influential books and series in my life. Other influential books that I remember reading include the Little House on the Prairie series, which I have the Barnes & Noble leather-bound edition with the first 5 Little House books. And I love the Barnes & Noble leather-bound books. I just think they're so elegant looking and just really nice. I like them. And then also the Chronicles of Narnia, which I also have in the Barnes & Noble leather-bound collection. And these are some of my I love these books so much. They're very important to me. And then, of course, another important book for me when I was growing up would be the Ender's Game books. Or book, I guess. I never really got into the sequels too much, but Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow, I was in love with those books, and I read those, I think there's a bug flying around. I don't know. We have a lot of moths here lately. It's kind of annoying. But anyway, what was I saying? Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow, I just love those books so much. I love Orson Scott Card in general, at least I like his first books. I think after his first books, he starts getting very political, and I'm not really into politics and a lot of political things, so I would get really bored and disinterested after the first book, but I loved Ender's Game, Ender's Shadow, and then he wrote another book called Enchanted, which is really good. I don't know where that is. We just moved here a few months ago, and some of my books are still in boxes upstairs. But, yeah, so, love Orson Scott Card. As far as my favorite genre, my moods change all the time. I went through a period of time where I only wanted to read dystopians, like Divergent, Hunger Games, anything dystopian. I wanted to get my hands on it. But lately, I've kind of gotten bored with that genre. I think it's just been so overdone that I know what's going to happen. It's always like the same story, so I'm kind of bored with that genre. I'll probably come back around to it in a few months, but lately I've actually been on a YA contemporary kick. I just read 13 Reasons Why, which was amazing. I read it in a day. I can't wait to get my hands on Fangirl. Well, I have it. I can't wait to read it. I'm probably going to read that this weekend, and yeah, I'm really enjoying the realistic YA, which is like completely opposite from where I was a year ago. So I think it's interesting how my preferences change. I love urban fantasy. I'm not always YA. One of my favorite book series is the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. The Mercy Thompson series is not written for teenagers. It's basically about this girl who can turn into a coyote, and she kind of falls in with this werewolf pack. But it's not your typical werewolf story. It's just really, really well written. It's very unique. So the first book in the Mercy Thompson series is Moon Called. And if you pick up this book, you will be hooked. It's so good. And she's still writing books, so I mean, a new one comes out like every year. She's also got a companion series called the Alpha and Omega series. I think that's the name of the series. It starts off with a short story, which you should download on your Kindle before you read the actual books, because it kind of gives some background information on those characters. But it takes place alongside the Mercy Thompson series. They kind of overlap every now and then, though, so it's really interesting when you're reading, if you've already read, like, the Mercy Thompson series, it's really interesting when you're reading the Alpha and Omega series and you see those characters, like, interact with the Mercy Thompson characters. And you're like, oh my gosh, I know those people. So I love it when authors do that. But yeah. As for what I'm reading now, I'm currently working on City of Ashes, which is the second book in the Mortal Instruments series. A little background about my history with this series. I first picked up the first book, I think back in 2009 or 2010. I think it was not too long after it came out. And I did not have a good run with my first read through. I think I made it about halfway through, and for some reason, I just got really bored with it and set it aside. And then a few years later, well, last year, 2013, it was just, this series was being so overhyped. Not overhyped, but, I mean, everyone was talking about this series. They're coming out with a movie, and I'm like, okay, obviously I am missing something. So I gave it another shot, and I made it through the first book, and I enjoyed it, actually, the second time through. I think maybe the first time I tried to read it, my mind just, like, wasn't in the right place. So the second time that I read through it, I enjoyed it. I will say that the second book is a lot better than the first. And so if you are kind of like me and you struggle with the first book, definitely just push through it, because once you get to the second book, it is so much better. And I've heard that it only gets better and better. So, yeah, I'm really glad that I gave it another go, and I'm actually becoming a bit of a fangirl with this series. So, yeah. And I just ordered, was it Clockwork Angel, from Amazon, so it will be here, I think, tomorrow. Because I've heard that it's like a prequel to the Mortal Instruments, so I kind of want to read those and get a little background, before I move further into the Mortal Instruments series. So yeah, I will be doing that. So I am on page 271 of this book, so I'll probably finish that today or tomorrow, and then I'm going to do a video about, what I'm going to be reading this weekend. So, thanks for watching, and so excited to finally start my channel and join the vast, plethora of booktubers that are out there. And I'm just really happy to be part of this community now, and thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for a lot more videos coming up.